Okay, welcome to Community Conversation. So good to see people back again this week. I see lots of regulars. I want to let you know we have one more session after today. So next week's will be our final session for our spring series, but we will be back in the fall. Our fall series is going to be It's a Mystery. So your guess is as good as mine about what we end up doing, but it should be interesting either way. So today I have a new speaker to welcome to the Community Conversations family here. Daniel Ruiz is Executive Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Lower Columbia College. He is a first-generation college student earning a bachelor's degree in education from Boise State University, two master's degrees, one in healthcare administration from University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and one in athletic training and exercise science from BYU. He worked 7 seasons in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers as an assistant athletic trainer, as well as athletic training positions at multiple colleges. Dan has worked in teaching and administration at several levels, and he was a migrant field worker up until high school and lived in several labor camps in California, Idaho, and Oregon. Please welcome Dan Ruiz.
Thank you very much. And can everyone hear me okay? Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you for being here. I think the topic is pretty timely for what's going on around us. Um, when people hear the terms DEI, and this is a question for all of you, is when you hear the term DEI, what does it mean to you? Diversity includes. So what do those terms mean? What's that? Equal rights for everyone. Okay, great. Acknowledgement of different people. Terrific. Good. Anybody else want to add to those? Those are really good definitions. Well, a couple of things that we're finding out as we work in this field is that everybody has a different definition of what the terms are or what they feel that they are. And one of the things that we need to discuss as groups is what do those terms actually mean and how do those terms apply to us or apply to the organization that we work with. In the organizations that I've worked in the past, we've had different terms as to what does diversity mean or what does it look like? What does equity mean? And I think I don't know that all of us have some type of bank account. We hear the term economic equity when we're talking about finances. We also hear about the term inclusion. So we want to discuss those terms in the sense that makes sense to us and makes sense to our values and to also to the organization that we work with. So hopefully when we're finished at the end, you'll have hopefully some type of working knowledge when it comes to those terms. Oh, so anytime I use the term DEI in groups, external groups, this is kind of the reaction that I get, okay, from people. And again, the reason that I think that I get that is, again, people don't really quite understand what it is that we do on our campus and what DEI means to us. And I think part of that is not being able to have a discussion about this is what we mean. This is why it's important to us. An example of this that I'll give you is when I first came on campus, I gave a talk to Rotary, and the president of Rotary just wanted us or me to explain what is DEI and why is it on our campus. So I explained to one of the individuals that I knew prior to coming to the talk had asked me, "Are you going to give a talk on this?" And he was not a proponent of DEI by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. So having to discuss DEI in front of that group was not only difficult, but we really had to talk. We really had a really good discussion about how we want to see equity on our campus or even in our community, how we want to see everybody included in things on our campus and our community. And so I was trying to figure out what's going to be the best way that we could have this discussion with this group of people. So luckily, I turned to my left and I saw the Rotary poster. And and it finally hit me. This is how I'm going to do this. Well, if you ever been to a Rotary discussion, if you look at their poster, right on the bottom of it, it says belonging. And the first thing I said to them is, I really don't need to be here to talk about DEI because all of you are already doing it. I said, just look at your poster. When we talk about inclusion, we're talking about we want people to belong. And so that led to a really good discussion about kind of what we want to do and what's our purpose on campus. So hopefully we're going to turn this face into a smiley face, sometime soon. So before we really start talking about DEI and its definitions and what it looks like, we really need to look back. Oh, what happened to my pictures? Let's change my pictures. We need to talk about the foundations of it. And I apologize that my pictures all of a sudden shifted. DEI has been around for a long time, but there's just been different forms of it. And it goes all the way back to the time of slavery. So the first one that we want to talk about is the abolitionist movement. And the abolitionist movement, and again, these are just kind of, I summarized these, and I know there's a lot more to them. But where it really started was the abolitionist movement, which they were looking to end the efforts to end slavery. So they felt that every person should be treated with respect. Every person should have the right to freedom, to live their lives as they choose. So those are some of the tenets that are in DEI now. We still believe in those tenets. And it wasn't called DEI back then, but we know that it started back then. That was one of the things that helped kind of move that forward. The second one, which was really significant in the United States, was women's suffrage. So in women's suffrage, the fight for voting rights for women, and also to highlight gender disparities. And we are still dealing with some of those. If you've kind of been reading some of the news, I know that there's been some discussion on voting rights in some of our communities, but also that women are still fighting for equal pay. And also and I'll share some statistics regarding this, but how women still have to fight for C-suite positions. And again, salaries, benefits. So those things are still with us, but the women back in this era really helped start that movement to help make things more equitable and equal for women. And if I could just see that picture. So the other one below it, I can remember it, was for for advocacy and looking for ethnic disparities and how we address those. This probably okay. Good, that didn't do it on that one. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's late. Yeah, part of it was labor laws. So, and I think if you've ever been a part of a union, okay, one of the things with union is all about equity. So their job is to ensure that workers have equal pay for their work. And so again, unions have been around a long time, and I know that unions are really big in our community. And so their job was to be able to do that. So looking at the next era, make sure I get this right, okay, is the civil rights era. So that went from 1960 to 1970. So the first big event during this era, was the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act, again, helped kind of push forward the notion that we shouldn't be discriminating based off race, color, religion, sex, national origin. So that's really where you see the movement now with DEI. A lot of that really started to come about because of the civil rights movement. And again, DEI was in its infancy back then. Do you remember a group called the Black Panthers? It's okay. So the Black Panthers, part of their kind of, I don't want to say manifesto is not the right word, but the things that they were working towards is, again, they wanted to separate the groups, but the reason they wanted to do that is because they weren't receiving equity out in the working force in housing. They were seeing so much discrimination in their communities that they felt that they had to separate themselves. And so part of that work that they were doing was based off some of the things with the Civil Rights Act. Affirmative action. So recently, uh, and again, I'll talk about this when we talk about what DEI is not, is affirmative action helped kind of address the historical inequities in the system in education and employment. And right now, we know that affirmative action has been ruled against by the U.S. Supreme Court. And again, we'll talk about that here in just a little while. But what we're starting to see now with some of the directives coming out by the administration is we're kind of trending back towards that affirmative action language, which has been really interesting. Is we've had a shift in the way we discuss or our non-discrimination statements, how we deal with it. But now we're starting to see affirmative action kind of pop up a little bit, and even more so with the next one, which is the equal opportunity Employment Opportunity Commission. And what their job was to do was to enforce federal work laws in the workplace. And again, this came about because obviously people weren't being treated equally in the workplace, which led to a lot of workplace biases. And it particularly affected women in a significant way. So these things came out of the 1960s. So again, this is some of the things in now that are still in place when we talk about DEI. I know at the National Convention, we actually had a long discussion regarding the Employment Opportunities Act, because we know that with some of the directives from the administration that we need to ensure that we're not discriminating against people, that we're treating everybody equally. Well, the work of this commission has even become more important. But the thing that's interesting about that is that they're defunding, or they're kind of reducing the work of that commission. So that's what's been a little bit interesting with this. The next one is corporate inclusion initiatives. This is from the 1980s to the 1990s. This is when you started seeing some diversity programs really start to hit the workplace. And again, those were to address workplace biases. So what a workplace bias is, it could be males not wanting to work with females, or work with people of color, or just any of those types of people with disabilities. So the diversity training programs were put in place to give employees the resources to be able to address some of those biases. So we started seeing those, again, early 1980, we started seeing those come around. The most significant of the corporate inclusion initiatives was the Americans with Disabilities Act, and this was in 1990. And I think I remember when this came about, to ensure the rights for individuals with disabilities. We know that that's important. And the reason that came about is because there was no equity for people with disabilities. And I'll use one of the examples when it comes to equity, how I discuss equity as related to the Disabilities Act. And then globalization was the other one, is companies that recognize the value of diversity in their corporations, because we are a global society. Our economics is tied to a global economic system, and we're all diverse. We're all different. And it's important for companies to ensure that their employees know how to deal with different types of cultures, how we interact with each other on an international stage. So globalization really helped kind of push the DEI work in companies. And if I'm going too fast, or if you have a question, please raise your hand. I have no problem stopping. Modern DEI movements, and that's up until now. The first one was the Me Too movement. So that movement helped address the gender-based harassment issues that were happening. Especially, the big one that really started was Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood. That really kind of helped push that movement to the forefront. The other thing with it, and as I did the research for this discussion, and in some of my discussions with some of my other counterparts, is it also provided for inclusive workspaces for women and for people of color. So it helped address the culture within an organization. And again, it was really important that those things be addressed, because there was such an inequity when we kind of look back at those stats, and we talk to people who were in those spaces, how inequitable the systems were for them to be able to advance on and to gain salary and to gain positions of power. So it was a pretty significant movement in the work of DEI. The other one is Black Lives Matter. It's to address systemic racism and police brutality in our country. And we saw a lot of that during the pandemic. And it also helped address, or at least brought to the forefront, is there's still systemic racism out there. And how are we as a society going to address those? And how are we going to be positive change makers to make people feel included in our organizations and in our communities? So Black Lives Matter is still there. It's still doing its work. Still very important. And the other thing is that people need to understand is that Black Lives Matter not only addresses the systemic racism within the Black community, but also the other ethnic communities that are in our society. The other one is LGBTQ plus rights, the advancement for marriage equality and workplace protections. This is the one that we're seeing under attack right now, significant. We're seeing the pullback by some organizations for protections for our LGBTQ members, our trans members. We're starting to see a rollback of some of that, which is really disappointing. And I think it's really important that we address those issues and that we keep those out in front because we want everyone to feel included in our society. And for some reason right now, and I think we kind of know the reasons behind it, obviously they're political, is that we don't want to exclude people from what it is that as a society we want to do, and we want to help people advance no matter what. Okay. So are there any questions over the history? I know that was a quick history lesson on DEI and where it came from. So it's not a standalone thing. It's not something that's brand new. It is something that's been with us for quite some time, but it's had different iterations as we kind of move through time. So what is equity? So when people hear the term equity, they're thinking, okay, it's just something that's based off of race. So if we have a person of color, then it just deals with them, which is completely incorrect. So when we think about equity, and these definitions are off the LCC DEI strategic plan. So to read it, it's an intentional practice of identifying, dismantling unjust structures, policies, and practices that perpetuate systemic oppression based on, but not limited to, race, ethnicity, gender identity, language, ability or disability, sexual orientation, economic status, religion. Okay, so that encompasses quite a bit. It's not just about race at all. Also, the thing with equity is it tries to establish a corrective piece as we're looking at some of those inequities or barriers within the system. So I want you to think about with yourselves of a time where you felt that you didn't have the same exact resources for you to advance it. It was in a job or if it was in a classroom. Just think about that. Just think about that for you. And think about how that might feel to a student who comes on our campus and doesn't have the exact same resources, doesn't have access to a computer, doesn't have access to teachers, doesn't have access to food. So we have a food pantry on campus. So those are types of inequitable, or I should say, that's how we address the inequities on our campus. But just think about students who don't come to our campus. I know at the secondary level, there's several students who don't have those things so that they can be on the same playing field as the rest of their counterparts. So we want to provide students with resources and also meet them where they are to ensure that they can be successful students and productive citizens in our communities. So as we look at the definition, so what does it really mean? It really means fairness. So we want to be fair to everybody. We want to give everybody an opportunity and access to resources, to educational systems, to finances. We want to give them those opportunities and accesses so that they can become successful. That's what equity is. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So we want to be equitable to everybody. Now, confusion. When you talk about equity, most people will say, oh, well, we're treating everybody the exact same way. So what we're talking about now is equality, or we're treating people equally. But being equal doesn't, if we treat people that way, which is great, we want to do that, but that does not ensure equity for an individual. So my example is, so if I have three individuals standing right in front of me and I give each one of them a bicycle, person right here, okay, he can ride a bike with no problem. So now I have an elderly person who has balance issues. I give them a bike. And then I have a person right here in a wheelchair and I give them a bike. Am I being equal? Am I treating them equally? I am, because I'm giving them each one the exact same thing. But am I being equitable? I am not being equitable. And the reason that I say that is the person with balance issues, how can I expect them to ride a two-wheel bike when I know they have balance issues? Can I do something to adjust for that? Sure, I can give them a three-wheel bike. For the person in the wheelchair, I know that they can't ride a bike. So how do I make the situation equitable for them? I can gift them a hand crank bike. So now all of them can ride a bike, but it's different. I've met them where they are. I've given them resources so that they can ride the bike. So I know that's a very simplistic way of talking about equity, but that's what you do, is that you would kind of adjust, okay, for what that person needs to be able to do what it is they need to do. The other thing I like to show, why is this? There we go. I think everybody's seen this before in some form or fashion. So this visually shows the differences between equality and equity. So we'll look at these first two, the middle two. So you look at equality, and it's just the example that I just showed you, or that we discussed. So for equality, okay, we give everybody a box so they can look over the fence and watch the ball game. I'm being equal. But looking at the picture, can everybody see the game? No, because obviously we have people of different heights. So we're not being equitable because we're not adjusting for whatever that person needs. We're not giving them the resources for that. Now, if I want to be equitable, we'll look at the second one. So now, obviously, the tall person really doesn't need the box. And then we give the other boxes to the other individuals who need to kind of move up to be able to look over the fence. So now I'm being equitable because I'm giving them the resources to be able to watch the game. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Okay, so now there's two things that we need to add to this. So it's great that we can do this. But part of the work with DEI is that we really have to look at the first one, is reality. What is reality? So if we look at this image, there may be some who have significant amount of resources. And that's what's obviously shown by that diagram. And then we have a second person who can look over. But we have people who have nothing. Or actually start with again, we think about our houseless individuals. I know that I dealt a lot with homeless teens, and they didn't have a place to go to at night. So where are they? They're on the streets. So that is their reality. So I have to meet a person where they are to be able to kind of help them hopefully get to these stages here. So we always have to we have to think about in DEI work is, what is the reality of the situation? How can we help people where they are? And they may be starting from nothing. Now, the last one, liberation, this could also be called justice. So, and the reason it's called justice is what's missing in the picture. I'm sorry, the fence, right? The fence is gone. So now what we've done is that we've eliminated barriers to everybody. So now everybody can equally, we don't have to worry about accommodations. We don't have to worry about giving them, specific resources. We've eliminated it. So now everyone has access to whatever it is that we're trying to do. So hopefully we will get to this point. This is the goal. And sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. That's reality. But we hope this is our goal, is that we want everybody to enjoy the resources. We want everybody to be able to have access to opportunities to be successful. So hopefully this kind of helps define equity a little bit for everybody. Okay, so I said that we were going to share some statistics when it comes to equity. So the group that has benefited more from DEI are women. That is the group that has benefited the most. And what's happening with some of the legislation that's being, or some of the executive orders and the legislation that's being put out there, is that we're going to see some of that rollback. If it goes into law, we'll see a rollback of some of that. But just think about that by itself on top of what the statistics look like right now for women. So if we look at this, it's really important that for companies who actually practice DEI, for them to be able to ensure that they're constantly looking at their DEI practices, that they're constantly looking at what their goals are, to ensure that that there's equity within their system. So if we look at the representation of women in corporate roles, so if we look at the stat under 50%, so it's percentage of employees. And again, this was a workplace survey done in 2024. So if we look at it at the entry level, women have pretty significant, it's high. It's close to 50%. But as we move down the continuum from manager all the way to C-suite, which is senior vice president, could be president, or more of a president, we notice that statistic goes down. And one of the responsibilities of chief diversity officers in corporations is to make this last one, the C-suite, look like the entry level for women. That's an example. That's one of the goals in corporations is to be able to do that. And the concern is right now is as certain corporations start to move away from their DEI practices, that it's going to be harder for women and people of color to attain the C-suite level. And that's really significant. Okay. The next one I want to show you is then again, it's the same study, is women remain underrepresented at every stage of the corporate pipeline. So if we look at the statistic, okay, if we look at the first one, so under entry level, okay, of the percentage, okay, white women and women of color, which make up 48%, you can kind of see where they land at the entry level. But if you look all the way over to C-suite for women, we notice how that drops, that percentage drops. It's now to 29%. So is that really equitable for women within the workforce or whatever this corporation is? Not really, because we're seeing a drop for women. Okay, so we have to reverse that. And that is one of the functions of DEI work in corporations, is to look at the statistics, look at the data, and see how can we address that inequity. Because I've worked for both males and females at the higher level, so obviously university presidents, that again, some are great, but some aren't so good, and they still progress up that. And when you have other people who really have the tools to be very successful. So again, there's just a lot of those cultural pieces that are still out there that hold people back. And we're hoping to address some of those things as we move along. So hopefully this helps. And we notice too on this statistic, or on this graph, if you look at women of color and if you look at men of color, how it also significantly drops as it moves down the continuum. Okay. So any questions over equity? Yes.
That for the graph, how does that relate to people's percentage in the population?
So give me an example of what you mean.
Feel like women are about 50% of the population, and I'm not sure what percentage Black women are. So I have no way of, but I'm sure they're less than 50%.
So you're talking about kind of just overall, is that what you mean?
To
To this?
Yeah, the percentage of people in the different
So,
jobs.
so we know overall that so if we're talking about this is pretty much across the board, is that women of color still have a very low percentage of being able to get into those manager level. I'm sorry.
Percentage of population.
Yes. Yes. Still, yes. It's pretty much the same. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
But homeless as a group, would they be considered or could they be considered a subset of the DEI?
Yes, it could be. It could be,
I
but
don't see them mentioned.
yeah, in certain organizations will try. It's really hard to get stats on them because they're so trans. You can't. It's hard to get them to fill out forms. It's hard to get information. I know that they've tried to do that so that at least they can kind of address some of those issues with them. It's really difficult.
Kind of a phantom number there. We don't really know.
We really don't know. We really
We have
don't.
a pretty good idea that
Yeah.
they should be included.
They should be included, but again, because those stats are so different from communities to communities and how they deal with the homeless population, makes it really difficult to do that. And I know that in our community, I know we have the food banks. I know that they try to at least kind of have an idea of who's coming through their facilities to help them, but it's really difficult.
In this community, it's considered okay to discriminate.
Oh, like yeah.
It's considered all right.
Yeah, and those are the things that we have to work through. We have to keep, I want to say, you have to keep the pressure up in order to be able to try to make some change with those groups.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
sure, we can talk about it in questions. Yeah, absolutely. But yes, I do agree with you is that we have to deal with that population. And the way we do it is try to get resources, but I know resources are limited for communities to be able to address the issue, but we have to be able to do that to help them. Absolutely. This kind of talks about what you're talking about, is that they do discriminate against them. So inclusion, think about, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
An LCC
Yes.
qualified. There, I put 36 years in here. How do you see, or have they gone through I'll say our position in that diagram once before that.
This one?
Yeah, where we are, particularly along the line of administration, or how we rank in that the progression of our female and our people of color and our white male domination. Have you looked at that, or is that something that is available?
So are you talking about just of our administration or our faculty or students? Okay, so looking at the stats that I looked at. So as far as administration, I can tell you, I am the only person of color on the administration. I'm it. And if you look at male female, so our ELT is primarily made up of female, and then there's 2 white males, and then the rest are 3 white females. So that's kind of that's the makeup of our administration, our leadership. As far as faculty, our faculty is diverse, but we want to make it more diverse. So we would like to bring in more people that look like our students, more people of color. Obviously, we want to ensure that women have the exact same opportunities, and that's why we're starting a new faculty onboarding system to hopefully retain those individuals on our campus. Our population, as far as students, is one of the things that's kind of an issue. I don't say an issue, but as far as the population that's enrolled, we have a very high female percentage compared to male, very high. And that's one of the issues that we have to work through, is why is it that we have that big disparity? So we're not quite sure of that, and that's what we're trying to identify. And I think our faculty, in conversations with some of them, They have some ideas of, things that we could do to kind of increase that population, but we're still not quite sure why we're seeing that disparity. Again, it could be, if it could be salary, it could be access to, the campus, or, it could be some people actually commute from Portland. Is that a barrier for them? So it's a lot of those things.
Yeah. I'll cheat by saying I was in kind of your position when I was here. And somewhat a little different as vice president at Mount Hood Community College. And I look at the differences of how the recruitment of students and faculty are. And I can't say the word. Here is fairly good, but there are other community colleges in our state system, in our neighboring Oregon, that seem to get better.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's the population demographics, but as you look at that, a lot of people that are hired are really not from just this area. We speak about along. I have no idea where I'm going with this, so I'm gonna shut up and let you proceed.
No, it's okay. To kind of address what you had mentioned about recruitment and retention, that is one of the initiatives for our office, for the DEI office, is how do we do that? What is the most effective way to do that, especially with our K-12 partners? Because if you look at the demographics in the school districts, we're starting to see a rise of a really large Latino population in our community. And also we're starting to see a really significant climb in the percentage of Chuk individuals in our community as well. So how do we service those groups, or how do we give them resources so that they can come on campus and know that LCC is a viable option for them?
See it being encouraging and accepting.
Right.
And that the accepting is what I saw at this other institution. That was not a lot of their students were getting on a bus and going to PCC rather than staying in the area that they're living in. And I don't. That's nothing.
No, and I think one of the ways that we address that is through our Running Start program, where we have the students from our local school districts come on our campus and take classes. And so we're hoping that through some initiatives that we're hoping to start not in the next couple of years, if not next fall, is to try to get to those groups to show them that we want you here. And again, that kind of leads to what we wanted to talk to next. So thank you for your comments. If I can get this to go, is inclusion. So I want you to think about a moment when you felt excluded from a group and how that felt. You're not welcomed. We don't want you here. And part of the work of DEI is to help people wherever they are, is to feel welcome and included in the environment that they're in. That's significant that's a very important thing, and a significant thing for us here on our campus, is to ensure that we are looking at belonging for our students, for our staff, our faculty. It's really important. And that's why we're making some changes within the system to ensure that our students, again, on all those groups, feel like they're included in what happens on our campus. So if we look at the definition, it's the act of creating environments in which and again, that's the key word, any individual or group can be and feel welcome, respected, supported, and valued to fully participate. We want students to feel like they belong here. We want them to participate. We want them to be involved in campus events. We want our faculty to feel like they can do research or any of those types of things that make them feel fulfilled. We want to, again, retain our diverse faculties. And again, that goes back to, we want them to feel respected. We want them to feel welcome. We want to make them feel a part of our family on our campus. And so those things are really important. How much time do I have left? Courtney, how much time do I have left? 10 minutes? Okay. So again, we want an environment where a person feels that way. Also, we want to create a sense of belonging. We want everyone to be here. So it would be really tough if, I was at the door when all of you first came in and said, okay, you can't be here, you can't be here, you need to leave. Would that feel very welcoming to you? No, obviously it wouldn't, right? It wouldn't do that. Okay. And what does that look like? So on our campus, so I'm going to give you some statistics on inclusivity. So the characteristics is, again, respect, open communication. Sometimes employees in certain corporations or groups feel like they cannot openly communicate with people and say, you know what, this is a concern of mine. How can I work at trying to fix this? Or, I don't feel like I belong here because of this barrier. We want to be able to have those open lines of communication for people so that they feel like they can make a change in their community. Collaboration, very important. This work is not done in a silo. We have to collaborate with people to make this work. That's why it's important that all of us are involved in the process. And psychological safety, really important as well. We have to be able to give people protections in order to make them feel like, I'm going through some tough times, or, what, I don't feel very comfortable. Can I make an adjustment so I feel comfortable? We have to be able to give people those things to make them feel included. So if we look at inclusion, if we look at the stats, inclusion is really important at the corporate level. And that's why you see companies like Costco really invest in their DEI programs. And I know Costco was in the news a few months ago because they were not backing down from their DEI initiatives. And reading an article about the CEO of Costco, one of the reasons said is that's what we do. We make our employees feel like they belong here. They work hard. They give them benefits. They just make them feel like we're part of a big family. So with companies, 1.7 times more likely to be innovative. So if you get people who are of different groups, who are, again, this diverse group, they tend to be more innovative. And the reason that happens is everybody has a different viewpoint on how to deal with the problem. So if I had this group here and we had a problem that we had to solve, we probably would get lots of different ideas on how to solve this. And then we could probably think about, hey, well, okay, let's figure out what is the procedure for solving this problem. Everybody has a different way of looking at it. And typically you tend to be more innovative when you can do that in groups. So the more diverse a group, the better problem solvers you have and better decision makers you will have. Also 2.3 times more likely to have higher cash flow per employee. And the reason that you see that is if an employee feels as though they belong in a system that they're not going to miss work, they're going to be work on time, they're going to do everything they can to stay employed with that group. Costco has looking at the statistics, very low turnover of their employees. And they have people who have retired actually go to work at Costco. And the reason they go to work at Costco is because, again, the environment, they feel like I'm not discriminated against because I'm older. Actually, they look at those employees and say, this person has experience in this area, so I could put them over in the TV section and they can, again, train the younger individuals as to this is what tech looks like, or this is how it works. So they actually look for older individuals who have experience, which is really interesting in the article. So I thought it was really good, really well done. In higher education, so again, the system is not perfect. We know that. And these are the reasons that we have the work on our campus. It's 21% of students report a disability, who have a disability, report significant challenges. So, and if you think about 21%, that's a pretty significant number of students who are reporting that. And again, this is kind of an overall statistic. These are not LCC stats, but and those things could be ADHD, could be a learning disability, and also could have sensory issues. So, and those are things that really hold back students. And we have to address those things as instructors, as people who provide resources for our students, that, we need to ensure that they have access to things for them to be successful. Again, now, sometimes students don't do a very good job of reporting those things to the people who need the information to help them. But once they get to, I know in our campus, once that gets to our disabilities officer, they do a pretty good job of trying to help that student through those issues. And again, we also have to think about, we don't want to out that student that they're having a sensory issue or learning disability. So again, we're very quiet with some of that stuff. But again, think about learning disabilities. An individual may have a hard time looking at the board, may have a hard time looking at text. And we were just joking about this just a while ago, is I'm getting to the age where I have to blow up my emails to be able to read those. So I don't, okay, good. So again, those are just accommodations to kind of help our students. And by doing those things, and if we help our students do that, they will tend to stay here, we'll retain them, and then hopefully those individuals will be our recruiters saying, hey, this is what they did for me on this campus. Again, so that's what we're working on. Okay, the last one, diversity. No reason to be scared of diversity. If you look through this crowd, you're all different. You all bring different experiences. You all bring different perspectives on problems, perspectives on our communities. And that's a good thing. We want the diversity. Diversity makes us stronger. It really does. Because again, you have a different viewpoint in order to be able to solve problems. I know that the homeless issue came up. I think it's really important. And you were asking, okay, how do we do that? How do we even begin to work on that problem? Well, the way we begin to work on that problem is to get people from our community together and think about, okay, what does this problem look like in our community? What resources are available, and how do we get those to those people who need it the most? How do we do it? Because there's a lot of different pockets in our community who work with those groups. But at the same time, having experienced this with some of the groups in our community, sometimes it's really difficult to get those groups to talk together, to come together. And to say, hey, we can do this as a collective to help our people in our community. But again, sometimes it's really difficult to try to get those individuals to accept the help, but at least we can try. That's what we can do. So if we, again, look at the definition, and again, this one's the one in the strategic plan, is psychological, physical, and social differences that occur among any and all individuals, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, socioeconomic status, education, marital status, language, age, gender. So there's quite a few categories that fall under diversity. We're just different. It means differences. So, and I'm glad that we're all different, because wouldn't you hate to see like 10 of me up here, right? So it's good that we have that. And again, diversity makes us better. It makes us stronger as a group of people. It really does. So the benefits, again, we kind of discussed these already. So it enhances creativity and innovation. Everybody has a different viewpoint. When we're talking about solving problems, is having diverse groups really does help with that. Sometimes those diverse groups can get a little bit heated, but that's okay, because again, which shows that you're passionate about whatever it is that you're discussing, and we want to solve the problem. Improve decision-making, different viewpoints. Increase productivity and employee engagement is if we have different groups within our communities, employees will tend to want to be more engaged with those groups. They want to learn more. And again, that's why you provide resources for employees when we talk about diversity, so that they understand different cultural backgrounds and that how those people make decisions. Those things are really important. When I used to teach healthcare classes, one of the things that I used to teach my students is we would have this exercise where I'd have different pictures up in my classroom, and I would tell students, okay, you have a sticky in front of you. I want you to take that sticky and I want you to just describe what you see. Just tell me what you see. And so I would have all of my students do that. And then I went back and I described, this is what you're seeing in this picture. So I can remember one of the pictures I had was an elder from a tribe and an indigenous nurse. And one thing is that we had obviously an indigenous student in my classroom is like, oh yeah, you never talk to an elder. It has to be someone from their family. I remember her telling me that. And she shared that with my class. And the reason it was important for them to know that is we need to know how to deal with different cultures of the Hasidic Jewish faith. You don't go up and you don't just touch certain individuals. They have to have family in the room. People of the Muslim faith, you have to have a male in the room. So by learning about those different cultures and thinking about those diverse backgrounds, I think it really does help us how to interact with people, because it's really different for some. Enhanced learning and professional development, which we hope to do, and strengthen reputation, improve public image. People want to work where there's diversity. One thing about working here at the college, this is a diverse group. And it's not just, and I'm not just talking about color. I'm talking about cultural differences. I'm talking about gender identity. I'm talking about all those differences. It is just great to be around because everybody's different. And everybody has a different perspective. And it's really helpful for me working in DEI, and I know Alexander as well. It's really important that we have those groups because they're the ones that are going to benefit the most from the work that we do, or all of us. Okay. So what I want to talk about is what DEI is not, and I know my time is limited. So I'll run through these real quick and I'll stop after this. So if we think about diversity, so if we think of its opposite is uniformity. You have 10 of me up here. Yeah, it's really exciting, isn't it? No, it's boring. Okay. Equity. So the opposite is that is inequity. Inclusion, exclusion. Why would we want a system where all we have is uniformity, inequity, and we exclude people? Would all of you want to be a part of that system? Would you guys have a lot of fun? No, right? So for me, as a person who works with this every day, for me, I just don't understand. I have a hard time understanding how anyone would want to subscribe to something where you just had uniformity, inequities in the system, and we were excluding people from wanting to be successful. That's just not in my makeup. Okay? And the other thing too with DEI, it's not a racial quota. I've heard that so many times. It is not a racial quota. Actually, racial quotas are illegal. So in our state and in federal laws, again, University of California versus Milwaukee, that one, okay, that was the one that kind of set the stage for, you know what, we can't use race. Okay, we're discriminating against people. This is the recent one is the Students for Fair Admissions versus the President Fellows of Harvard College. We can't use admission. We can't use race for admissions. And then I-200, which is the Washington Civil Rights Law. So that's what kind of, that's where our non-discrimination statement developed from, was from that law. Now, these are not perfect, and we know that. Because once that we saw these enacted, we did see a dip in students of color coming to college. We did see that. So, but that's why we start the practice of DEI on campuses, is to kind of help with that statistic. Okay. So it's not a racial quota. Okay, so I will stop there because I know I'm out of time. And I think do we have time for any questions? About 5 minutes for questions, or even that?
We can stick around for a little bit if you want to do questions
Sure,
real quick,
that's fine.
but I also want to take a moment to thank Dan for coming out and talking to us. Does anybody have a quick question? Hey, there you go.
Hey Dan, my question for you would be, with everything going on with DEI, what continues to get you up in the morning to do this work? Like, what's the hard work for you with this topic?
The thing that gets me up is what my experiences were growing up. I know you heard in my intro, I was a migrant field worker when I was very young. So I worked in the fields, hoeing onions, topping beet, all of that. And I lived in labor camps. And I think those experiences for me, and also the people that supported me, my parents. I remember one teacher who was very supportive of me, who saw something in me that I thought this is going to be my life. And she didn't let me do that. And so she pushed me when I was in high school. Because in high school, I was, I was not good in high school. And so she's the one she's the one who just really pushed me to see my potential. And so I think for me, those individuals who gave me that opportunity, I want to be able to give it back to someone else. And this is how I do it. Because I've been around groups, like my time in the NFL, I've been around groups who have lots of money, who, are buying all these expensive things. And then I see other people who who don't have money to even buy food. And so I think for me, that's what set it in concrete was this is how I'm going to make a difference for my community. So that's why I get up and do the work.
All right.
So.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all of you for coming. We have one more week. Come again next week. Sarah Griffith is going to be talking with us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.